The shuttle's descent was smooth until it wasn't. Corin Miles braced himself as the left stabilizer hiccuped, jolting the entire cabin like a drunken sneeze. He bit back a curse as his elbow slammed into the interface panel. The screen blinked accusingly in Zelveran script, which he didn't read but had begun to recognize by the sheer number of curving lines that resembled panicked squid. Somewhere behind him, a soft voice announced in 12 languages, landing sequence, 30 seconds. Please remain calm and do not attempt to open external hatches unless you enjoy vacuum exposure. Noted, Corin muttered, flexing his shoulder. Outside the viewing dome, Zelver Prime filled the sky, a canvas of luminous blues and geometric auroras, like someone had taught a nebula how to perform ballet. Twin suns bled low across the horizon, casting fractured shadows over silver spires that spiraled from the jungle like half-buried tuning forks. It was beautiful. Which was suspicious. Beauty, in Corin's experience, often hid things. Razor worms in flower beds. Politicians in silk. Royalty with agendas. And Corin had just been delivered, gift-wrapped in diplomatic insignia, to a planet ruled by a queen he'd never met, representing a government he barely trusted, carrying a treaty he hadn't even read in full. It was stapled together in 4 languages and one visual math dialect that made his nose bleed if he looked at it too long. But orders were orders. The shuttle exhaled as it docked into the reception tower. Corin smoothed his tunic, diplomatic gray, reinforced with nanoweave in case of unforeseen backstabbing, and checked his reflection in the dark glass. Tired eyes. 3 days stubble. No time to shave. His hair was doing that rebellious curl at the temple again, the one that refused to acknowledge command structures. He stepped into the docking bay and was immediately greeted by an orb. Floating. Humming. Pulsating faint blue, like a jellyfish who'd taken up interpretive dance. I am Keech, it chirped. Your assigned liaison. I enjoy poetry, mineral tasting, and the destruction of lies. This way, please. Corin blinked. You destroyed lies. Figuratively, said Keech, rolling lazily in midair. I was voted most disruptive truth interpreter in my cohort. I once exploded a Senate session with a haiku. Follow me. There was no arguing with that. Not successfully. They floated, well, Keech floated, Corin walked, through winding halls of semi-organic architecture. Walls shimmered like fish scales. Ceilings retracted to reveal stars, then dimmed again like bashful sky gods. Everything smelled faintly of ozone, citrus, and something he couldn't identify, something like memory. They passed only 2 other people, a pair of palace engineers adjusting what looked suspiciously like a decorative vine but was, according to Keech, a thermal regulation filament. Both bowed when they saw him, and one whispered, "He's the one," though Corin couldn't tell if it was awe or confusion. Keech deposited him before a set of tall, ivory-like doors carved with fractal etchings that rearranged themselves when he stared too long. She's waiting, Keech said. Who? Keech paused. Your dentist. Go in. The doors slid open. Corin had prepared for a grand throne room. Fire. Choirs. Or at least one trumpeter. Instead, the space was quiet. Intimate. Circular walls curved around a platform of glass and gold. Soft moss grew in spirals on the floor. No guards. No advisors. Just her. Queen Lethari. She stood with her back to him, hair like liquid starlight falling past her waist. Her long ears, elegant, almost feline, tilted slightly as he approached, and without turning, she spoke. You wear the wrong shoes for diplomacy. Corin looked down. These were the only pair that didn't scream, I'm compensating for a lack of tactical support staff. That earned a faint smile as she turned to face him. Her eyes were dark and endless, reflecting not just the room but something deeper, something like patience that had forgotten how to be surprised. She wore no crown, no scepter. Her clothing was a seamless sheath of living fabric that adjusted its texture as she moved, like it was keeping secrets even from gravity. "You're late," she said. "I got lost," Corin replied. Somehow Keech thinks poetry is a navigational system. She tilted her head. "It is. You're just not reading the corridors correctly." "Fair enough." She stepped closer, and her gaze flicked across his face as if cataloging the spaces where truth might leak. Then she nodded, once. "The treaty?" Corin handed it over. "Paper version. For ceremonial shredding, if desired." She accepted it but didn't look. Instead, she walked past him to a low shelf, placed the document there beside an orb of glowing moss, and turned back. "It's done," she said. "You fulfilled your part." Corin blinked. "Wait, that's it? You wanted parades? I would have settled for applause. Or maybe a complimentary mug." Her smile deepened. "Your humor is unrefined. But useful." Corin scratched the back of his neck. "I'll take that as a compliment." Then came the moment that rewrote every briefing he'd read. The Queen stepped past him toward the chamber's inner ring, reached up, and unclasped the thin diadem from her brow. It blinked once, pulsed, and then dimmed. She set it, carefully, deliberately, on a small cushion near his travel pack. And then she turned and walked to the resting alcove. The bed. Wide enough for two. Built into the curve of the wall. Pillows made of something that sighed when touched. Hari sat down on its edge and smoothed the blanket. "Tonight," she said calmly, "you will sleep beside me." Corin opened his mouth. Closed it. Tried again. "Is this a test?" "Yes." "What kind?" "The kind you won't be told about until after you've either passed or destroyed something important." Corin looked at the bed. Then at the door. Then at the bed again. "Right. And if I politely request separate quarters?" She blinked. "Then I would politely assume you are hiding a plasma grenade and detain you until further notice." He stared at her. She didn't blink. "You're joking." "One of us is." A pause. Then Corin sighed, muttered, "Worst sleepover ever," and started removing his boots. Hari watched him. Quiet. Observant. Her ears twitched once, the tips lowering by a fraction. Somewhere above the planet, the stars turned their faces away. And below, in the moss-wrapped walls of a room not found on any blueprint, an envoy lay awkwardly beside a queen who didn't snore, didn't speak, and didn't stop watching the shadows until morning. Corin woke with one arm numb and a growing suspicion that the universe was having fun at his expense. The numbness, he discovered, was due to the Queen of Zelver Prime using his arm as a pillow. She wasn't heavy, more like the weight of silk warmed by sunlight, but she had somehow wound her limbs around his like a sleepy vine with regal authority. Her long ears twitched occasionally, as if dreaming in Morse code. Her breathing was slow, precise, and entirely unbothered by his very awake panic. He stared at the curved ceiling above, which was now softly glowing with artificial dawn. Somewhere nearby, a chime played a melody that sounded suspiciously like a lullaby performed by whales with jazz aspirations. He had questions. Questions like, is this standard diplomatic protocol, or what does one do when the planetary monarch treats your shoulder like a national pillow? Also, where is my other sock? He shifted gently. Hari stirred but did not release him. "You're not authorized to move yet," she murmured. "I wasn't aware I needed permission to regain circulation." "You don't." "But I do enjoy the proximity." "Your Majesty," he said carefully, "I am not entirely sure what happened last night." "We slept," she said, voice drowsy. "Together." "Not as a euphemism." "Your people love euphemisms." "Yes, well, we tend to avoid calling anything what it actually is. It keeps things exciting." Her eyes opened. Black, glossy, and utterly unreadable. You radiate honesty in a way that is inconvenient, she said. It's why I kept you here. Corin swallowed. I assumed it was my irresistible diplomatic charm. Also that. She sat up, untangling herself with the grace of someone born to make others feel like clumsy mannequins. Her tunic shifted with her, reweaving itself into daywear with a low hum, like bees adjusting their formation. She tapped the side of the wall, and a panel slid away to reveal a sink, a steaming basin, and what looked like an electric comb with sentience. Corin sat up, one sock missing, hair aggressively rumpled. So. Am I allowed to ask what this is? This, royal sleepover arrangement. She looked at him as if he'd asked whether gravity required batteries. This is protection, she said simply. From what? Her ears twitched. From the voices, she said. The ones that come when I am alone. The crown magnifies them. It was meant to unify. Instead, it opens. He blinked. Voices. As in, plural. Yes. And you, sleep beside random diplomats to block them? No, she said. Just you. Right. Obviously. Hari approached, bare feet silent on the floor. She reached past him, plucked something from the bed, a delicate sliver of silver tech shaped like a spiral, and slid it behind her ear. He hadn't even noticed it had fallen off during the night. Immediately, the air around her shifted. Not physically, but psychically, like a storm had taken one breath inward and was considering whether to scream. Her face remained composed. The crown is not just a symbol, she said. It is an interface. A conduit. Our people once merged their minds during war to outthink invaders. Now, I carry their residue. Every Zelveran emotion. Every flicker of rage, fear, joy. All of it in me. All the time. Corin stood, wobbling slightly. That sounds deeply unhealthy. It is. So why not remove the crown permanently? She gave him a look that could curdle milk. Because without the crown, she said, we fracture. It is the glue. I am the hand that holds it. He scratched his chin. And I'm the, what? Weighted blanket? Closer to a signal jammer. Oh good, he muttered. Every boy's dream. At that moment, Keach the floating orb zipped in through the ceiling duct, spinning cheerfully. Good morrow, honored too. I detected conscious thought. And a trace amount of romantic tension. Shall I prepare nutrient smoothies? No, Corin and Hari said in unison. Keach paused, then hummed the same three-note jingle from the day before, almost sulkily. Very well. I will alert the kitchen to initiate awkward silence breakfast mode. He zipped off again. Corin turned back to the Queen. So, what now? Am I your emotional thunder blanket for the duration of this treaty, or is there a time limit on psychic babysitting? Hari gave him a look that made him wish he hadn't used the term thunder blanket. You'll remain until the crown stabilizes, she said. I believe your presence offers temporary shielding. The more time you spend near me, the less the artifact can breach. Corin frowned. You keep calling it, the artifact. It's not Zelveran. No. It was given to us. By travelers older than our sun. We were told it would unite us, keep our minds aligned. But the unity has a cost. He was about to ask what kind of cost when a low chime rang through the air. Hari stiffened. Council session, she said. You'll join me. Me? In your council? You're the reason I'm coherent, she said flatly. You'll stand beside me until I no longer need to. That's, no pressure at all. She was already moving. Corin rushed after her, half-hopping as he yanked his missing sock from beneath the bed. The palace hallways were stranger by daylight. Light bent around corners. Walls pulsed like they were breathing slowly. At one point, they passed through a chamber filled with floating cubes that whispered phrases in ancient languages. Hari ignored them. Corin did not. One of the cubes whispered, *, beware the Queen's crown. It remembers things that never happened. *. Corin shivered. They reached the council chamber, circular, tiered, filled with beings of various species. All turned as Hari entered. Their gazes flicked to Corin with subtle unease. Ambassador, one muttered. The Terran. Queen's pet, another hissed, too low for most to hear. Hari walked with purpose to her place on the dais. Corin followed, doing his best not to trip on the glowing tiles. She turned, faced the room. The treaty stands, she said. We will honor it. But more pressing matters rise. She touched her temple. The crown shimmered into partial visibility, a web of golden light across her brow. I have heard the voices again. Silence fell. Then murmurs. Then fear. Not possible, someone whispered. The seal holds. It cracks, Hari said. And when it does, the first breach will not be through walls. It will be through minds. She gestured to Corin. This one, she said, is not of our neural field. His mind is opaque. Resistant. Untouched. The council stared. He will remain beside me, she continued. Until the crown is quiet. Someone stood. A tall figure with a glass-like spine and rippling skin. He is Terran, the figure said. They fracture easily. He is also funny, Hari replied. Which helps more than you'd expect. The silence turned heavier. Corin, sweating, cleared his throat. Well. If I'm going to be the royal mood stabilizer, I'd at least like a badge. Or a commemorative hat. No one laughed. Except Hari. Done, she said. Keech will design one. Corin sighed. Of course he will. And above them, the crown flickered once more, like a thought trying to break loose. It turned out being the Queen's psychic buffer came with perks. And by perks, Corin meant absolutely none. Unless one counted meals delivered by silent drones, invasive psychic check-ins from humming walls, and Keech composing spontaneous ballads in his honor, most of which rhymed envoy with decoy. Repeatedly. Still, he was alive. Mostly sane. Sleeping in the Queen's chamber every night hadn't gotten less weird, but at least it had achieved a sort of ritual normalcy. She never touched him beyond the occasional shared blanket drift. She never explained the dreams he sometimes felt brushing the edge of his mind, the ones where glass trees shattered under lightning and something vast stirred beneath them, faceless and patient. But in the mornings, she always watched him with that unreadable calm, as if checking for cracks. And every time he didn't have any, she nodded like a craftsman satisfied with a freshly welded hull. On the fourth morning, Corin found her standing barefoot in the water garden, talking to the moss. Well. Not to the moss, exactly. To a shimmering hologram projected just above it, a display of neural data that spiraled through the air in loops and pulses. The crown has begun forming recursive loops, she said when she sensed him. Dreams bleeding into waking memory. My own recollections overwritten by images I never lived. Corin stepped carefully across the slick stones. That sounds deeply unsafe. It is. But fascinating, she added, with a spark of curiosity that reminded him she wasn't just a monarch. She was also a scientist. The kind who poked sleeping gods with sharp sticks to see what they'd do. You're enjoying this, he said. I'm cataloging, she replied, brushing her fingers through a cluster of bioluminescent fronds. Before it unravels. Should I be worried? Yes. But not yet. Keech chose that moment to descend from the canopy, dangling upside down. You're invited to breakfast in the East Solar Lounge. Counselor Vey has grown curious about the human digestive system and wishes to observe. That's not creepy at all, Corin muttered. Bring humor, Keach added. It makes them less likely to scan your colon. /**. The East Solar Lounge turned out to be a levitating greenhouse orbiting the palace's highest spire. It rotated slowly to simulate sunrise. Transparent walls filtered ultraviolet radiation into warm hues that made even the grumpiest of guests look like benevolent forest spirits. Vey was tall, angular, and seemed to be constructed entirely of thin, vibrating plates. When Corin arrived, the counselor was already seated at the moss-lined table, tapping a set of tuning forks against their chest to speak. Terran, Vey said, his voice a series of clear tones. You ingest combustible liquids with flavoring? Coffee, Corin said, nodding. Yes. It fuels our survival and sarcasm. Curious. Vey lifted a cup. Made of compressed pollen, apparently, and sipped experimentally. Then promptly made a noise like an offended wind chime. Let Hari arrived then, silent and regal as ever, and took her place beside Corin. She leaned in slightly. Vey once tried to drink motor oil to understand engine metaphors. And he understood nothing but combustion. Breakfast was a collection of oddly textured cubes, one of which giggled when Corin stabbed it. He ate anyway, mostly out of bravery. Or hunger. Or possibly resignation. So, he said, wiping his fingers on a cloth that dissolved in his hand, what's today's agenda? More council drama? Another awkward session of, why is the Queen sleeping with a Terran? Let Hari didn't look up. You're not sleeping with me. You're sleeping beside me. Tell that to the gossip vines in the hallway. One tried to pinch me yesterday. She raised an eyebrow. That's a test. You passed. I feel deeply validated. She pushed away her plate and rose. We're visiting the archive. Corin stood. The archive? The place where the crown was sealed. Vey hissed. The vault is restricted. I am the restriction, let Hari said coolly. And I override it. Corin blinked. Just like that. Just like that. Keach, now bobbing nearby with a tiny parasol, added, she once overrode a planetary lockdown to retrieve her favorite boots. They were good boots, let Hari said. /**. The entrance to the archive lay beneath the palace's spine. They traveled by magnetic lift, descending past levels Corin hadn't even known existed, chambers filled with statues, crystalline storage banks, and flickering constructs that whispered in ancient tongues. When the lift stopped, the doors opened to a narrow tunnel of light. Beyond it, a spherical chamber pulsed with energy. It was built by the foreseen, let Hari said, stepping forward. A species that claimed to hear futures before they happened. Corin followed, the hairs on his arms standing. What happened to them? They vanished. Leaving behind gifts. And warnings. In the center of the room sat a pedestal. On it, a duplicate of the crown. Or perhaps the original. It shimmered with layered harmonics, frequencies Corin didn't so much hear as feel. Let Hari approached and placed her palm on the pedestal. The room responded. Lights dimmed. A circle of glyphs illuminated the floor around them. The crown lifted into the air, and a hum filled the chamber. Then the voice came. Not speech. Not music. But presence. Ancient, amused, and watching. Corin staggered back. What is that? It speaks only through resonance, let Hari said. But lately, it's begun forming words. Words, indeed, began to surface, coalescing in the air as glowing script. He listens differently, ***. He is divided, ***. Corin swallowed. I'd like to lodge a formal complaint with whoever programmed the creepy space helmet. The script flickered again. Division is desirable, ****. Entanglement begins, ****. Lethary's face remained neutral, but her fingers trembled slightly. It's reacting to you more strongly than I expected. Yeah, well, I'm very personable. The crown pulsed once more. 2 minds. 1 wall, ****. Then the script faded. The crown descended back into stillness. The chamber lights returned to normal. Silence followed. Corin looked at Lethari. Care to translate? She exhaled. It sees in patterns. And it sees you as a crack in its reflection. Something unpredictable. Something it cannot sink. That's good, right? That's unknown, she said. Keech's voice buzzed in through the wall. That's also how my last relationship ended. Corin turned back toward the crown, which now sat inert again. For the first time, he felt not just curious, but connected. Not to the artifact, but to her. To this strange planet, to this queen who slept beside him not from affection, but from necessity. And to something else, just beyond the veil of understanding. Something that had noticed him. Something that was waiting. There were days when Corin questioned his sanity. Then there were days when a sentient staircase insulted his fashion choices, and he stopped bothering to keep count. You wear gray again, the stair whispered as he descended. Dull. Non-confrontational. Soothing like wet sand. It's a diplomatic uniform, Corin muttered. Not a fashion statement. Tragic, the stair replied, folding in on itself just enough to make him stumble. By the time he reached the lower wing, he was muttering curses in 3 languages and considering whether he could file a formal complaint against architecture. Lethari was waiting for him in the corridor beyond, a quiet curve of pale stone where the air was cool and scented faintly with copper leaves. Her long ears twitched once as he approached. You're late. I was verbally harassed by the infrastructure. You must have provoked it. Corin raised a brow. Is victim-blaming royal policy now? She turned without answering, her stride smooth and silent. He followed, glancing at the corridor walls, which pulsed faintly in time with some unseen rhythm. Where are we going? To the Chamber of Remembrance, she said. There's something you need to see. Will it make me question reality? Yes. Will it involve another crown that tries to crawl into my dreams? Hopefully not. That's comforting. She didn't elaborate. Which was typical. They passed under an arch shaped like folded wings. The chamber beyond was vast, circular, open to the sky above. Light streamed in through refractive columns, casting shimmering patterns across the floor like moving water. In the center stood a tall crystalline structure, surrounded by a ring of suspended glyphs that rotated slowly. This is where we store memory, she said. Not data. Memory. Corin squinted. You mean, emotional impressions? Precisely. Recorded from key moments in Zelveran history. The crown links to it. Draws from it. Sometimes too deeply. He stepped closer. The crystal pulsed, and without warning, the air around him shimmered. He saw fire. Not burning, it was memory fire, abstract and clean, the way a mind might remember warmth without pain. Shapes formed, Zelverans in ancient armor, standing against a fleet of black vessels that blinked like eyes. He heard voices, not speech, but intention. Grief. Pride. Sacrifice. Then it shifted. A queen, young, eyes wide with resolve, stood at the center of a collapsing city. She placed the crown upon her head, and everything went silent. Corin staggered back. The memory snapped. What was that? He whispered. Queen Sereth, Lethari said. My grandmother. The first to accept the artifact's full resonance. It saved us. But she did not survive it. Corin frowned. Then why keep using it? Because unity is stronger than freedom. That was the logic. Until the voices grew curious. She stepped forward and touched the crystal herself. A second memory unfolded. This time, it was Hari, much younger, perhaps 16. She stood before a council chamber as the crown was lowered onto her head for the first time. The moment it touched her skin, her knees buckled. But she didn't fall. Corin watched as a wave of thought, dozens, maybe hundreds of minds, brushed through her. She flinched. Then smiled. Then cried. The memory ended. It wasn't always like this, she said softly. In the early days, it was beautiful. Intimate. I felt everyone. Every joy. Every sorrow. We were a single organism. She looked at him then, eyes sharp. But now there are thoughts that do not belong. Shadows that do not feel Zelveran. They whisper in languages no one remembers teaching. Corin exhaled slowly. You think something's inside the crown. I know it is. He hesitated. And it reacts more strongly to me, because I don't belong. She nodded. You're a wrinkle in the pattern. An outside mind it cannot parse. That's why I keep you close. He gave a crooked smile. I'm starting to feel like an extremely squishy firewall. Lethary's lips curved faintly. A charming one, at least. A beat passed. Then Keech's voice crackled through a panel above them. Your majesticness and ambassador mildly terrified, we have an issue on the outer spire. Hari frowned. What kind of issue? The sky kind. You should come see. /**. The outer spire rose like a needle above the palace, surrounded by electromagnetic shielding and decorative flame orchids that occasionally exploded for aesthetic reasons. When Corin and Hari arrived, the guards were already assembling. Beyond the glass platform, the sky writhed. It wasn't a storm. Not in the traditional sense. There were no clouds. No rain. But something moved through the upper atmosphere, dark ribbons of light, shifting too quickly, as if the laws of motion were being second-guessed. Localized anomalies, one of the guards said. Electromagnetic signatures don't match anything in our registry. Hari narrowed her eyes. It's testing our defenses. Keech buzzed in. Analysis shows interference patterns matching the resonance frequencies of the crown. Something up there is broadcasting psychic noise. Corin leaned against the railing. So, it's not just in your head anymore. No, Hari said grimly. It's learning to reach. The air around them buzzed. Not audibly, but in that strange, stomach-deep way that said you are being watched by something that doesn't blink. One of the guards suddenly staggered. I hear it, she gasped. It's singing. Corin stepped forward. Pull her back. Two others grabbed the woman and hauled her away. Her pupils were dilated. Her mouth moved, but the words didn't line up with the sounds. Not exactly. Corin caught a few. Open the gate, in the crown, in the dream that dreamed us. Hari stepped close and touched the guard's temple with 2 fingers. A pulse of golden light rippled outward. The woman collapsed, breathing shallow but steady. Corin stared. What did you do? I severed the connection. You can do that? Not often. Not safely. And not again today. Keech buzzed louder. The entity is attempting a mass connection. We must reinforce the cognitive barrier matrix. Corin's eyes narrowed. You mean we have a psychic firewall? Yes, Keech said. But it's very old and mostly metaphorical. Like my patience. Hari looked to Corin. We'll need to enter the crown's dream space again. Together. He paled. Last time I did that, I had a dream where gravity turned inside out and I got eaten by a piano. This will be worse. He exhaled. Great. She touched his shoulder. But this time, I'll be with you. Corin looked up at the sky. At the flickering shadows that moved like thoughts unspoken. All right, he said. Let's see what the nightmare wants. And somewhere, in a frequency between stars, something listened. Corin stood in the center of the Queen's chamber, barefoot and unsure whether he was about to sleep or be consumed by the collective dream of an alien civilization. The crown rested on the table between them, humming faintly, pulsing with layered thoughts, like a library trying to breathe through its bindings. Its surface no longer gleamed but shimmered, like it couldn't quite decide what it wanted to be: metal, light, memory. Possibly a migraine. Leadhari stood across from him, silent, composed, her long ears angled back in a posture he'd come to understand as anxious restraint. She hadn't worn the crown in 3 nights. And every night, the voices had grown louder. Last night, one had called his name. Which was deeply unfair, considering he hadn't even signed up for this job. He'd come to deliver a treaty. He was still trying to figure out if that had technically happened. She reached out now and took his hand. Her skin was cool, like water that remembered stars. Are you ready? She asked. He took a breath. Definitely not. Good. That's the honest answer. She lifted the crown. Corin expected some kind of grand light show. Instead, the moment it touched her brow, the room blinked out. *****. He stood in a corridor of mirrors. Or perhaps not mirrors, reflections moved without him, replaying scenes like memories caught in feedback loops. There he was, stepping off the shuttle. There, sitting awkwardly beside her in bed, muttering about the lack of complimentary mints. There again, in the council chamber, suggesting commemorative hats. Each image shimmered, overlapped, whispered things not quite in his voice. Then Leadhari appeared beside him, not walking, but becoming, as if this space had waited for her to define its shape. This is the heart of the crown, she said, her voice quieter than thought. This is where it holds everything it cannot forget. Corin looked around. Are we inside your head? No. But we're touching it. And it's touching us. Creepy. She stepped forward. The mirrors collapsed, replaced by open space, an infinite dark sea of stars arranged in spirals, each one pulsing with faint colors. Then, without warning, the stars shifted. Began to speak. Not words, but concepts. Regret. Hunger. Calculation. Infinity trapped in a loop. The presence emerged slowly, like a memory long buried surfacing for breath. It didn't take a shape. It didn't need to. But Corin felt its attention land on him like gravity. You are outside, ****. The words didn't echo, they pressed. Corin stepped forward. Not by choice. You are different. Divided. Unmapped, ****. I get that a lot. Leadhari spoke now. We demand to know your nature. What are you? The presence rippled, and for a moment, Corin saw images flash through the void, worlds stitched together by thought, species sharing a single mind, harmony, but only after the self had been devoured. Then, pain. Loss. Silence. And then, seeding. The crown being gifted. Passed from star to star. It's not trying to control you, Corin realized. It's trying to survive. Leadhari turned. What? He looked at her. It's not a parasite. It's a remnant. A ghost of a hive mind species that fractured. It left pieces of itself behind in tech, gifts. Hoping to link again. He pointed at the stars. But every time it tries, it consumes. It forgets boundaries. And now it's scared. Lethrie's eyes narrowed. Fear doesn't excuse infection. No. But maybe it explains it. The presence shifted. We seek unity. You bring chaos, asterisk asterisk. Corin raised his hands. Yeah, well, chaos is what's kept her sane. Me sleeping beside her. That's not intimacy, it's interference. I jam your signal. She stays herself. He stepped closer, voice firmer. You don't want unity. You want certainty. That's not the same thing. The stars flared, briefly angry. Lethari stepped forward. So stop pushing. Stop reaching. You were meant to share thought. Not replace it. We are fragmented. Alone, asterisk asterisk. I know, she said softly. But you don't heal by devouring others. A long silence followed. Then the stars dimmed. Their rotation slowed. The pressure eased. A new message emerged, faint, like breath fogging glass. Can you hold us? Without losing yourself, asterisk asterisk. Lethari looked to Corin. He shrugged. We've had worse roommates. She nodded once, then reached up and removed the crown. But the dream did not vanish. Instead, it pulsed, lighter, thinner. The stars retreated. The presence folded inward. Not gone. But quieter. At peace. And the dream dissolved. Backslash asterisk backslash asterisk. They awoke in the Queen's chamber, the crown resting inert between them. Corin sat up slowly. Did we just reason with an ancient alien collective consciousness? Yes, Lethari said, blinking. We did. Keech's voice pinged through the wall. Congratulations. Your psychic resonance stabilized. Also, someone left a pastry outside your door. Corin rubbed his face. I vote we declare a holiday. Crown Apology Day. Lethari stood, moved to the window. Outside, the skies were clear. The flickering anomalies had vanished. Birds, real ones, sang from the crystal terraces. You did more than survive, she said. You taught it to listen. I mostly annoyed it into submission. Still effective. He joined her at the window. So, now what? Am I dismissed? She hesitated. You're free to go, she said. But the bed's been quieter with you beside it. Less haunted. He smiled. You asking me to stay? I'm saying, you're no longer just the envoy. They stood together, not touching, but aligned in a way that defied architecture. A queen and a human. A treaty and a threshold. Not lovers. Not quite allies. But something new. The crown rested on the table, silent. Not gone. Not defeated. But listening. Waiting. And for once, content to let them speak.